Today we will continue our journey in the book of Matthew chapter 12 verse 1 to 14. And we will see as more and more people oppose Jesus. In fact, in today's passage it is the Pharisees who are opposing Jesus. Who were the Pharisees? They were religious leaders who studied and interpreted the law given by God through Moses. And in Matthew chapter 12 verse 1 to 14, the Pharisees are caught up in some rules regarding the Sabbath. And we are going to see what Jesus had to say. How did Jesus respond to them? Have you ever put a lot of effort into something only to realize that you totally got it wrong? That's what we see about the Pharisees. They are on a mission to perfectly follow God. They're trying to keep all the rules and make sure that everyone else does well. However, they're totally wrong. Let's turn our Bible to Matthew chapter 12 and let's read verse 1 and 2 to start with. Now we see over here that Jesus is walking through the grain fields on a Sabbath, and the disciples, being hungry, they pluck some grain, the heads of the grain, to eat them. And the Pharisees for some reason are there and see them doing that. And then they ask Jesus, look, your disciples are doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath. Now what is Sabbath? The Sabbath was the day, or the last day of the week, the seventh day. Because God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh day. And He commanded His people in the Old Testament to rest on the seventh day of the week, which is basically Saturday. God did not rest because He was tired. But God rested because He saw that it was good, His creation was perfect, and there was nothing more that needed to be done. That His creation would sustain on its own from now onwards. And all through the first chapter of Genesis, one thing that we see over and over again is that there was evening and there was morning, and the new day would begin. So the Jewish people still follow the same pattern, for according to the Jews, the day begins at sundown and ends the following sundown. So when the sun goes down, instead of for us it is a day is over, but for the Jewish people the day has begun. A new day has begun. So for the Jewish people the Sabbath began on Friday at sundown and end on Saturday at sundown. So the Jews would go to the synagogue to worship God or to the temple on Friday evening or even on Saturday before the sundown, since both the day was considered as Sabbath. So who changed the day of worship from Saturday to Sunday? Or why was it changed? The early believers saw that Jesus was resurrected on Sunday morning. So they began to meet on Sunday morning to commemorate the resurrection of Jesus in the first century in Jerusalem. Now remember, the early Christians as well as Jesus and all His disciples are Jewish people. So for them to change from Saturday to Sunday was not easy. But for them it was very important to remember the death, the burial and resurrection of Jesus. And today there are many churches that debate, or they are divided over this. Is Saturday worshipping is right or Sunday worshipping is right? We call it the Sabbath keepers or the Sunday worshippers. Now the Saturday worshippers, the Sabbath keepers, they say they are right. Since it's commanded in the Bible in the Old Testament. The Sunday worshippers, they cite Acts chapter 20 verse 7. On the first day of the week we come together to break bread. And so they cite this passage that the early Christians met on Sunday morning to have communion together and to remember the death, the burial and resurrection of Jesus. So who is right? The Sabbath keepers or the Sunday worshippers? Let's look at a few passages in the Old Testament before we come back to Matthew 12. In Exodus chapter 16 verse 23, let's turn our Bible there. The first time God commanded to keep the Sabbath is found in Exodus chapter 16 verse 23. So the first 50 chapters of Genesis and the first 15 chapters of Exodus, that is a total of 65 chapters, has no mention of keeping Sabbath. It was not even given to Enoch, Methuselah, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, not even to Joseph. The house of Israel lived for 430 years in Egypt and they were not given the Sabbath law. That means over 1,000 years, possibly many more years passed before God made the Sabbath a law. So if it is not applicable to Adam, not applicable to Abraham, not applicable to Jacob, who was it given to? Does it apply to us today? To find an answer, let's go to Exodus chapter 31, verse 12 to 17. And let me read this in English. Let me read this in English. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Say to the Israelites, you must observe my Sabbaths. This will be a sign between me and you for the generations to come, so you may know that I am the Lord who makes you holy. Observe the Sabbath, because it is holy to you. Anyone who desecrates it is to be put to death. Those who do any work on that day must be cut off from their people. For 6 days' work is to be done, but the 7th day is a day of Sabbath rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day is to be put to death." The Israelites are to observe the Sabbath, celebrating it for the generations to come as a lasting covenant. It will be a sign between me and the Israelites forever. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, and on the 7th day He rested and was refreshed. Do you notice something over here? Observing the Sabbath law was given to the Israelites. Look at verse 13. Say to the Israelites. Verse 16. The Israelites have to observe the Sabbath. Verse 17. It will be a sign between me and the Israelites. So, today, does it really apply to us? Not really, because this was for the Israelites, for the Jewish people at that time. That changed with the coming of Jesus. Let's get back to our original verse in Matthew chapter 12, 1 and 2. So Jesus is accused that his disciples are breaking a Sabbath law. Now we are told in the passage that Jesus and his disciples were hungry. And so they looked around to eat something. They saw grain in the field, they took it. And by the way, this is not considered as stealing. The Jewish law allowed people who were hungry to take a small amount of grain from others' field. The Pharisees did not have an issue with Jesus and disciples that they were stealing. The issue the Pharisees had was they were breaking the Sabbath law. They were working on the Sabbath by breaking the grain head. You see, the Pharisees and the religious leaders had developed at least 39 different types of rules relating to working on the Sabbath. 39. Harvesting of wheat or head of grain was one of that rule that you're not supposed to do. Even if it's a small amount, it was considered as work. Now you might think that's funny, little bit. Think about some other things that they considered as work. You cannot carry anything in public on a Sabbath. No notebook, no car keys, not even a stick. You can't lit a fire on a Sabbath, and if you did lit, you can't, put it out on a Sabbath. It was considered as work. You can't have a bath on a Sabbath, neither can you wash clothes. You can't cook food on Sabbath. It has to be cooked before. You can't write or draw on a Sabbath, and even if you did before, you can't erase it on a Sabbath. If a fruit is fallen from the tree, you cannot eat on the same day. You have to eat the next day. You can't even smell a flower on the Sabbath. That is considered as working. Even in a walk, you can't walk more than 1 kilometer on a Sabbath. That means if you have to go to the synagogue, everyone has to live half a kilometer around synagogue, because going and coming back should not be more than 1 kilometer. If you go to Jerusalem and Israel, they have called the Sabbath elevators in the hotels. That on the Sabbath day, you don't have to push the button. It stops at every floor, because they consider pushing a button on the elevator as a work. Can you imagine how hard the Pharisees made the people follow all these rules, while that was not even in the original command? God's purpose of Sabbath was very simple. It's a day of rest, not a day for you to feel guilty. Let's look at how did Jesus respond. Matthew chapter 12, verse 3 to 8. Jesus did not address the law or the interpretation of the law of the Pharisees. Instead, he gives them two exceptions that we see in verse 3 and 4. The first example is of David, and this is actually in 1 Samuel chapter 21, when David is running away from Saul. And it says that David and his men went into the tabernacle and ate bread that was supposed to be eaten by priests only. And the priest even allowed that to happen. And the second example was given of the priest himself. In verse 5, the priest themselves violated the Sabbath law because they had to work very hard on the Sabbath so that the temple function would continue. And so Jesus is making a point. If it was okay for David to eat that bread from the temple, it is okay for the priest to work on a Sabbath, then he, being the Lord of the Sabbath, it is okay for him to break the law. In fact, in verse 6 he is saying that he is greater than the temple. That's a bold statement to make, because the temple represented the holy presence of God. And by making the comparison, he is comparing, in fact indirectly telling them that he is God. He is greater than the temple. And they value the temple so much. So indirectly he is saying that if David, who is lesser, and the priests who are lesser than him, can break the law, since he is greater than the temple, it is okay for him also. And then in verse 7, Jesus quoting the prophet Hosea. He says, if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would have not condemned the innocent. Basically what Jesus is saying is, you don't know, you Pharisees, you religious leaders, you don't know what it really means to worship God. The Pharisees are trying to follow all the religious rules, and they are making others do, and yet they are so wrong. And what Jesus is talking about over here is, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Because mercy involves heart. Sacrifice, you can just do it. You can just go through the motion without your heart being in it. Now the big question that we've got to ask ourselves is this: is my worship to God just going through a motion, or is it from my heart? Now Sunday morning we come together, is that just to fulfill an obligation? Or do you come prepared mentally, emotionally, spiritually to worship God on Sunday morning? If our heart is not in our worship, then we are no better than the Pharisees of Jesus' time. And Jesus finally boldly says in verse 8, for the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath. He's saying that I am the Lord of the Sabbath. What are you going to understand, brothers and sisters? Jesus is greater than Sabbath or any other religious laws or regulations or sacrifice. Nothing can be compared to Jesus. He is greater than everything and is worthy to be worshipped. He deserves all our devotion. He deserves all our worship, all our sacrifice, all our heart. Let me ask you a question. Is Jesus truly the Lord of your life? Now the Pharisees did not have the answer to that. So they looked for some other opportunity to get at Jesus. Let's look at Matthew chapter 12, verse 9 to 14. Let me read in Matthew chapter 12, verse 9. Going on from that place, he went into the synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there, looking for a reason to bring charges against Jesus. They asked him, is this lawful to heal on a Sabbath? Now Jesus had gone to the synagogue, and some of the scholars feel like it was purposely the Pharisees put the man over there, knowing that Jesus would actually go and heal him. They wanted to trap him and accuse him, and they found an opportunity over here. They knew that Jesus would heal him. So even before he could do that, they asked him a question to trap him. Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? Now, according to the Pharisees' interpretation of the law of Sabbath was, you could only help a human in need if his or her life is in danger on a Sabbath. Now, this man's life was not in danger. And let's look at Jesus' response over here. What does Jesus tell them? He said, if any of you has a sheep and it falls into a pit on Sabbath, will you not take hold of it and lift it out? See, you see, the religious practice was that you can make an exception for an animal if it was in trouble on a Sabbath, but not for a man. And in verse 12, what Jesus is saying? A person is worth more than a sheep or an animal. So it is lawful to do good what is on a Sabbath. What Jesus is saying, that if helping an animal on a Sabbath is okay, then helping a human being who is made in the image of God is also permitted. It is greater. What Jesus is saying is love is greater than legalism. The Pharisees were being legalistic about everything, while Jesus was focusing on the heart. You see, legalism says we must follow more and more rules in order to earn God's favor. Legalism says that you can't eat on Sabbath, even if you're hungry. Legalism says that you can't heal someone on a day of rest. Legalism says that you can't listen to a certain music, can't wear certain dress, can't dance. Legalism says you must follow man-made rules. In the church sometimes we have that you need to behave certain way, follow certain things, be certain way, then you will be accepted. Legalism says that traditions and rules of man is more important than obeying God. If we are legalistic, then we are no better than the Pharisees. We become like Pharisees. Love leads us to be like Jesus. Amen?
Amen.
So I just want to encourage you, let's check our heart. Am I a legalistic person?
Yeah.
Am I someone who's always wanting people to follow rules? Or am I motivated by love? The Pharisees were motivated by legalism, but Jesus was motivated by love.
Yeah.
Amen? So how did the Pharisees respond to Jesus? Look in verse 14 as we close out this morning. It says in verse 14, what did the Pharisees do? But the Pharisees went out and plotted how they might kill Jesus. What did they wanted to do? They went out and wanted to plot to kill Jesus. It's hard to believe that the Pharisees wanted to kill Jesus over this one simple incident. However, that's what pride does. That's what arrogance does. That's what sin does. Rather than looking at where I need to change, what I am doing wrong, we focus on the other person who has hurt us, and then we want to take revenge to kill the other person. So in conclusion this morning, ask yourself, am I like the Pharisee in any other opinion today? If I've been like a Pharisee, then you know what? I got to repent. So I want to leave you with two thoughts, two things. Number one, we learned this morning is Jesus is greater than Sabbath. Nothing can compare to Jesus. He deserves our devotion. He deserves our loyalty. He deserves our obedience. He deserves our worship. And the second thing is, love is greater than legalism.
Yeah.
Amen?
Yeah.
Let's not be like the Pharisees. Let's not be legalistic. Let us be motivated to do things out of love and not because we have to follow certain rules. Amen? Thank you very much. God bless you. I hope you learned something. Let us remember that Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath. Nothing compares to Him. Thank you very much. Have a great week.